and welcome to this 10 easy ways to improve series. Whatever your level, you're going to find tips here that are going to make you a much stronger chess player. I remember when I was first starting out in chess as a kid, I just learned the basic moves and a few simple strategical ideas. Then I wanted to go further. But unfortunately, my father who taught me wasn't a really strong player. So I had to gain my information from reading books and by simply playing the game. I mean, I used to play with my friends at school, and this helped me to get better. But what I really could have done with was help from a coach to tell me what best to focus on. I mean, there's an enormous range of things you can do in chess and look at. Chess is a almost unfathomable sea of possibilities. So, it would have helped me just to be able to focus on the basics and the most important things I needed to know to reach the next level. And that really is the purpose of this series of DVDs. I'm going to use my 3 decades of coaching experience to help you to get better, to teach you what to focus on to get to the next level in chess. And this is the first of 3 DVDs concentrating on improvers. These are people who have, like me at that time, just learned the rules and know a few simple ideas about chess. Now we want to know what we're doing wrong, what we need to focus on, how to improve. Well, I've chosen 10 concepts at each level, which I think if you concentrate on, you will certainly achieve better results as a player. You'll feel your enjoyment of the game increasing, you'll get better. And the first of these concepts is concentration. Now, concentration is something which improvers often find difficult to achieve. Life is very rich, and the older you get, the more pressure you have. But even as a kid, you tend to think about lots of things, even during a game of chess. What you should try and do is focus on the game and the game alone when you're playing it. Set aside everything else from your mind and concentrate on chess. If you do that, your results will immediately start to improve. Now, the whole point of concentration is to avoid mistakes. Improvers' games tend to feature a lot of big mistakes, and that's what we're trying to cut out. If you cut out the big mistakes, you'll cut out a lot of embarrassing losses. Now, I've chosen a game from one of my students who actually lives in Denmark to illustrate what can happen when you lose concentration during the game. This game was played in September 2010. Playing white is a Danish player called Frank Jerning Pettersen, playing black a fellow called Uffe Kallenbach. I mean, these two players I would classify in the improvers category. Well, white kicked off with 1d4. Now, for most improvers, the move e4 is probably better to play. But d4 is a very safe move. As you can see, the pawn is protected by the queen, and this gives white's game a rock-like quality. Kids, young players, really should learn how to attack. I mean, we're going to come on to that a little bit later on this particular DVD. But older players tend to like the queen's pawn. They like the idea that they're not going to be thrashed in the opening. When you start to study opening theory, you'll see books, very thick books, on the shelves containing lots of moves. Well, in between those moves, there are lots of nasty traps and tricks to negotiate. And you'll find, the higher you get up the chess ladder, that players will try and set these traps against you. There's nothing to worry about, but as I say, older players perhaps like the thought that they're not going to be trapped in the opening, thus they tend to play d4, and black plays knight f6. As I've shown, the main motivation behind knight f6 is to stop white from playing e4. If white was allowed to play e4, he gets an ideal centre. And anybody at any level must fight for the centre in the opening. This is a key concept. Alright, well, white now plays bishop to g5. This is an opening called the Trompowsky. It's named after a Brazilian grandmaster, and it's motivated by the simple thought that white is going to play bishop takes f6 and double black's pawns. Black doesn't seem worried by this. In fact, he allows white to execute his threat. So white gaily goes on with doubling the pawns, and now he plays a very harmonious move, e3. Well, this is a modest looking move, but it's got 2 points to it. The first point is that white solidly protects the pawn on d4. Not that it needs protection, but black might be thinking of a strike on that pawn. As I've said, it's important in chess to fight for the centre. So if black were to play a move like c5, which puts pressure on the pawn at d4, white has that pawn solidly protected. Going back to the move e3, white also lets the bishop on f1 out and the queen on d1. So 2 good things with 1 move. Okay, black doesn't see any chink in white's position, so he plays bishop d6. So far, so good. And both sides, over the next few moves, go through with the opening principle of developing the pieces. White brings both his knights out, black gets his king to safety, and develops his bishop to e6. Bishop comes to d3, knight comes to d7, and now white plays pawn up to b3. And the point of this move is to be able to play c4 on the next turn. Despite the fact we're 9 moves into the game, both players are fighting for the centre. So what white would like black very much to do is to take that pawn on c4. Then white recaptures with the pawn, and he has 2 pawns in the centre. Pawns in the centre take away squares from the enemy pieces. So as you can see, black can't put any pieces on the key central squares c5, d5 and e5. Naturally, black doesn't like that, and he plays his pawn up to c6, holding the centre. Don't give up the centre in chess unless you have to. White castled. Black plays knight f6. White pushes on the queen side and plays b4. So white has obviously decided on the plan of advancing his queenside pawns. It's a little bit slow, but it's a decent thing to do. And now black puts his knight in on e4. Well, we call that an outpost. Black has put his knight on a very strong outpost in the middle of white's position. And it's my impression here that white starts to lose a bit of concentration. He doesn't like the thought of that piece in the middle of his position. And he doesn't like the idea of taking it either. So he's becoming a little bit worried about that piece. And he starts to play rather weakly as a result. Black, meanwhile, seems very focused. He is thinking about a direct kingside attack. So he brings the queen out to f6. The queen may slide across to h6. And there could be checkmating threats looming on h2. So white plays g3, trying to block out the threats before they even come into focus. Black plays bishop d7. White plays king g2. Rook fe8. And now rook ae1. I'm not at all sure about white's last 3 moves. It's my impression that white is losing his concentration and his focus in this position, and he's drifting. He's not making big mistakes yet, but he's certainly playing without a plan. Black, meanwhile, plays h6. Perhaps he's thinking of pressing forward with a kingside pawn attack, starting with g5. At any rate, white doesn't like that idea at all, so decides to try and stop him with h4. Well, black brings his queen to g6. And now, I suppose, white was thinking to himself, how on earth have I got myself into this mess? Black is possibly threatening to sacrifice a piece on g3. This will completely open up white's king and possibly give black a mating attack. Knight b3. Rook e6. Well, black of course here had the very tempting sacrifice available, bishop takes g3. Remember, checkmate ends the game. So, if you can open up the enemy king like this, maybe you should certainly think about doing it. Black's forcing white's moves. If white blocks with the queen, then black comes in here, knight g3 check, landing a nasty fork. Note, in this variation, white is following black's lead. Black may take the queens off, take the rook, bishop takes f1. Or maybe black thought to himself, okay, I've got 2 pawns and a rook for 2 knights, but I'm not clearly winning this position. The sacrifice can wait for a better time. So going back to the game, Kallenbach I think played a much better move here. Rook e6. Building up. Now if the attack comes, it comes with the addition of an extra rook as firepower. Well, white is all over the place here. I think he's drifting, he's lost his focus, he plays rook h1, and now of course the sacrifice is very strong. Black comes crashing in with the knight. In comes the queen. King f1, queen takes f3, check. Well, what is white to play? If he plays queen f2, then black can play queen takes rook, check, which is disastrous for white. So going back, king g1, rook takes e3, black is powering in here. Once white lost his focus in the middle of this game, there was no way back, and you often find this in games between improvers. Pawn up to f4. If we count the pawns, we find that black is 3 pawns up. Bishop f5, and now black played rook e8, with the simple idea of playing the rook all the way down to e1. Checkmate. Summarising this first key concept. You've got to concentrate in chess all the way through the game. Try to get everything else out of your mind. Doesn't matter what it is. And focus on the game. Your results will immediately start to improve.